Greetings fellow gamers, I'm the Soulsborne Seeker and today I'll be reviewing Primal Planet, an action survival Metroidvania game with RPG elements, developed by Seethingswarm and released on the 28th of July 2025 for PC, with plans for PlayStation, Xbox and Nintendo Switch console releases sometime in the future. Transpiring across a prehistoric world where dinosaurs reign supreme, the story follows a primitive man and his family whom, while enjoying their time by the fire alongside two small friendly dinosaurs, are suddenly attacked by a massive T-Rex. The parents fight back against the beast as they make a desperate retreat with their child, but their weak weapons are no match for the carnivorous beast, who proceeds to chase them, in the process killing one of the small dinosaurs and separating the father from his wife and daughter. Now in the company of the surviving young dinosaur, the man embarks on a journey to reconnect with his family, doing his best to not be devoured by the predators prowling the jungle while also clashing against a hostile enemy tribe as well as some visitors not of this world. The game's narrative is simple and straightforward but quite serviceable for what it aims to achieve, which is to make you care for your wife and daughter, something it wholeheartedly manages by demonstrating tender and wholesome moments amongst the family members that show how much they love each other, effectively allowing you to empathize with the father and his ordeal. What truly caught me by surprise here is how cinematic the experience ended up being, featuring several short action-fueled cutscenes that drove excitement forward for what was to come. That being said, if you're looking for something deep in the story department, you're going to be sorely disappointed since the game mostly relies on the novelty of its setting rather than some twisting storyline when it comes to its attempts to engage you, and succeeds in that department to a good extent. The world of Primal Planet is one where the strong rule and the weak are devoured, something you're constantly reminded as you travel across its interconnected map of lush jungles, musty caverns and fathomless lakes, all of which are stocked by a variety of different Jurassic creatures with different degrees of aggression. As a matter of fact, the game's flora and fauna are arguably two of its strongest aspects and selling points as the experience attempts to emulate the real thing, with the creatures you will come across behaving like actual entities that live and hunt separate to your own existence, making the whole ecosystem feel alive and persistent regardless of your role in it. For starters, Primal Planet features a full day and night cycle that influences the presence and absence of certain creatures, as well as a limited weather system that can inhibit you at times, such as rainy situations that snuff out any attempts to carry a torch around. In addition, your traversal of the land will bring you across dinosaurs sleeping, fighting amongst themselves, or feeding on the corpse of their conquered prey, all of which are circumstances you can take advantage of depending on your own goals. As an example, early on in my adventure I came across a large crocodilian dinosaur that prowled a lake, that proved too powerful as it kept decimating my attempts to kill it. Just as I was about to give up hunting it and move on, I stumbled upon the creature fighting against a school of mega piranhas and, when it was done with them, I jumped on the opportunity to finish it off given the damage it had already received, thus establishing that brains are just as important as brawn when it comes to survival. Survival is actually the name of the game here, and a concept that permeates the majority of gameplay systems you'll get to experience. As a human living in a world of massive, primitive hunters, you'll have to rely on tools and upgrades in order to ensure that you won't end up as someone's meal, and that's where the title's crafting system comes into play. More specifically, throughout your travels you will find certain locations where you can start a campfire. Said campfires function not only as save sites but also allow you to both craft new gear by using materials you have gathered, as well as upgrade your own skills and those of your accompanying dinosaur by utilizing skill points you gain by leveling up through combat, as well as interacting with certain points of interest I'll expand upon later on. Tools include weapons such as spears, throwing knives and spike traps, as well as consumable items like medicine, antidotes and cooked meat, all of which help keep you alive for just a bit longer. On that note, most of the tool blueprints and recipes will be unavailable initially and will have to be unlocked via the game's village upgrade system, which has you building up your settlement in order to expand your crafting options while also allowing you to recruit villagers that will offer assistance in exchange for specific items, all of whom return to the village if they end up falling in battle, after which point you can recruit them again. Character upgrades correspond to permanent passive improvements for you and your dino ally, including increased weapon damage, faster speed, more health, as well as special abilities like double jumping and dashing, and are arguably some of the most important things you'll have to focus on in order to become a force to be reckoned with, as well as have any chance at success. Now, while all of this sounds really cool, and as much as I appreciated the game's attempt to incorporate survival elements into the mix, most of said elements ended up being much more surface surface level than you are initially led to believe, and also not that important in the grand scheme of things. First and foremost, while Primal Planet offers several tools and consumables for you to craft, said items are also awarded to you via exploration, which kept me from actually bothering to unlock any of their blueprints since my scavenging constantly kept me stocked with the things I needed, which leads me to my second issue, which is the lack of usefulness for several of them. Aside from some basic weapons and consumables, the rest of the craftables felt largely unnecessary, something that I attribute to both the game's upgrade system as well as the limited presence of specific pitfalls said consumables were meant to counteract. More specifically, while you have the ability to craft some nice weapons, such as throwing daggers and spiked traps, to help you deal with some of the more dangerous predators, the damage upgrades for your basic weapon in combination with the incredibly effective attacks dished out by your ally once he is also upgraded made those tools somewhat lackluster, especially past the mid-game point, since dodging and utilizing hit-and-run tactics proved much more efficient and timely. This also applies to some of the game's more nuanced mechanics, such as throwing food to distract enemies, which I never bothered with from the get-go, instead choosing to attack and farm experience from weaker dinosaurs while easily avoiding the bigger ones until I was strong enough to take them down as well. As for the aforementioned pitfalls, while you're given the option, for example, to craft antidotes, the places that poison you are few and far between, and also not that lethal to begin with, making their crafting a waste of resources. Just to give you an idea, the only things I found myself crafting consistently were spears, which also dabble as torches, cooked meat for healing, as well as breathing devices to explore the depths, with the occasional throwing dagger to spice things up a bit, and that's pretty much it. Finally, the companion system that has you recruiting villagers to help you with your battles was very much welcome but came off as somewhat undercooked since, while there are a few different comrades to accompany you, I didn't really understand the difference between them, aside from their obvious melee or ranged approach to combat. Don't get me wrong, I'm not really complaining about them since they can prove useful as extra targets, but it would have been nice to have seen a bit more evident depth here aside from the recruitment process. In essence, while the game's first couple of hours make it seem like it boasts a very elaborate survival system that permeates every aspect of its gameplay, things fizzle out quickly as you realize that most of the things offered are either immediately unnecessary or soon rendered obsolete by the upgrade system. Moving on to exploration, the survival aspect mostly overtakes collectibles, though not completely. The discoverables here are divided into 8 different categories, those being crafting material, weapons, consumables, spirit trees, wall paintings, alien chips, map paintings, as well as a singular upgrade I found at the depths of a lake. Crafting materials constitute about 80% of the things you will be picking up and, as the name suggests, are utilized to craft weapons and consumables, both of which you can also find already crafted by looting sacks. Spirit trees are, for me, the most useful points of interest to seek out, since activating them immediately provides 2 skill points for your upgrades, which is amazing output. Wall paintings provide small story snippets in the form of images and also yield some experience. Alien chips are utilized to activate the game's fast travel system, which I will expand upon in a moment. Map paintings fully reveal the map of the area you're currently traversing, which is another thing I will be explaining in more detail shortly. Finally, the singular upgrade I discovered somehow improved my athleticism, though I'm not entirely sure about the exact advantage that gave me. Staying a bit on exploration, I was left with somewhat mixed emotions by both the map as well as the fast travel system implemented here. Starting with the map overview, there's a division between a world perspective, which shows you the whole setting, as well as a zoomed-in view of the area you're currently traversing. The world perspective was serviceable but quite crude visually, though it did offer some useful information in terms of where to find lost companions, which was nice. In terms of the zoomed-in perspective, it doesn't allow for any sort of movement or manual marking, but the activation of map paintings does reveal the whole map area, including points of interest as well as secret areas, so going for 100% completion is very much manageable. That being said, fast traveling across said areas proved to be quite inefficient, courtesy of a fast travel system that I'm definitely not a fan of. Fast traveling here is carried out via the use of these alien portals, each of which needs to first be activated by inserting a chip to its slot, which you can also remove at any time, effectively deactivating them. The problem here is that there's no area list to choose from when using a portal since they are each connected to specific biomes, meaning you'll have to remember where they lead to by memory. There was also a noticeable noticeable lack of them, which led to a lot of traversal on foot, something I didn't mind that much since I found the character movement quite snappy and fun, but still felt it was worth a mention. For reference, I only used said portals about 6 times during my playthrough, which goes on to show you how inefficient I found them to be. Word to the wise, make sure to keep about 10 or 11 of those chips on you instead of in the portals, since they are connected to the game's true and very much underwhelming ending, so save yourself some backtracking to reclaim them. In terms of combat, this is definitely the standout aspect of Primal Planet, which I largely attribute to the aforementioned ecosystem mentality the game does its best to emulate. To get things started, on a basic level you are capable of using both melee as well as ranged attacks to take down your enemies. Melee is carried out via the use of a stone club, which is going to be the weapon you utilize the most. The ranged approach is supported by 2 different armaments, namely throwing bone knives and spears, both of which can be recrafted at campfires. Spears are also utilized as platforms by thrusting them into walls and stepping onto them, as well as torches by lighting them on fire and then either using them to burn down flammable flora or cause increased damage to enemies. You can also craft traps that you place on the ground, which deal massive hurt to any foe that steps on them. On top of all these things, you have the aforementioned dinosaur ally that lunges at enemies on his own, who becomes incredibly helpful if you decide to invest in some upgrades for him, as he functions as both a damage dealer as well as a diversion, especially when facing some of the largest enemies the game will throw at you, which is when battle truly shines. I've already referenced the crocodile fight I dealt with in the early stages of the game, but as it turns out, that one was the smallest of the big predators you'll duke it out with. I'm not going to spoil the monstrosities you'll get a chance to hunt down, but I'll just say that there are some massive things stalking the jungle, lakes and ocean of this planet which would give the T-Rex a run for his money, and it was during those hunts that I believe the experience was at its best. My only problem here was that killing those things didn't really yield any special rewards aside from a good chunk of experience and an achievement. It would have been really cool to have seen some in-game trophies from these dangerous fights, even if they were just cosmetic, but I was still thoroughly impressed from the battles alone, which leads me to another somewhat sour point of my experience, and that's the bosses. While there were a lot of incredible beasts that could have functioned as boss fights, the game demonstrated a surprising lack of actual big bads. The number of bosses to duke it out with here is oddly limited, though the clashes themselves are appropriately tough and impressively cinematic. The reason why I find this limited number of villains odd is that, as already mentioned, there are some veritable monsters vying for supremacy over this world, and you do face those monsters, but they are treated as standard fights regardless of difficulty and do feel like missed opportunities when considering that they could have been implemented into more scripted situations that would have given way to some awesome set pieces. That being said, I'm still glad I got to fight them, even if it was not in the context of a boss battle. In terms of difficulty, Primal Planet starts off challenging and will have you fighting for your life against natural and alien forces, including a couple of boss fights that will test your reflexes and attention to their limits, with said challenge curbing gradually as you get more and more upgraded, though it never devolves to a cakewalk when considering the amount of damage dished out by some of the more powerful predators. Lengthwise, it took me 7.5 hours to complete Primal Planet with about 95% completion rate and 47 out of 50 Steam achievements earned, with an estimated additional hour to find a few remaining secrets for 100%. For a price of about $20, Primal Planet is worth the admission fee if you're into its Jurassic survival theme, as long as you keep your expectations to realistic levels. In conclusion, my time with Primal Planet started strong, but kind of fizzled out the more I played, though the game remained enjoyable for me throughout. I loved its retro presentation, I felt very much invested in the protagonist's ordeal to save his family, I was quite impressed by the ecosystem-driven mentality that permeated combat and exploration, I adored the massive dinosaurs stalking the land, and, to an extent, enjoyed the crafting and upgrade systems. On the downside, the crafting system did end up feeling skin deep and not that important in the grand scheme of things when taking the power provided by the upgrades into consideration. There was a noticeable lack of bosses present here that felt like missed opportunities when considering the wealth of dangerous beasts on offer. The companion system came off as a bit undercooked, and the story wasn't that memorable, while also featuring a very abrupt and underwhelming resolution. Primal Planet can be a very fun time if you temper your expectations, and is a wonderful achievement when considering that it comes from a solo developer. I just wish that the whole game was as exciting as its first couple of hours, instead of starting with a blast and then sort of cruising from there, especially given the amount of potential brewing at its core. As it stands right now, it is a serviceable Metroidvania with some grand ideas that it doesn't fully realize, instead opting for an interesting experience when it could have been a stellar one. My final verdict on Primal Planet is 6.5 out of 10. What are your thoughts on Primal Planet? Have you played it yet? Do you agree with the points I mentioned, or do you see things differently? Let me know in the comments below, and please subscribe if you enjoyed this video. As always, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, Soulsborne Seeker out!